Hello! Welcome to Path to Staff, where we discuss the software engineering career ladder and what it takes to become a senior level and above software engineer. Today, we're going to talk about the why, the when, and the how of design documents. Design documents are important for a few reasons. For one, writing down your thoughts and ideas is a lot better than scattered Slack threads and unrecorded Google Hangouts calls. They serve as single sources of truth for larger feature work. They're very easy to collaborate on. They reduce bus factor, so if you get hit by a bus, then your design is still there. And they also record your contributions so that you can point to these later for promotions and things like that. That's kind of the why. The next thing is when. Some tasks are just too small for design documents, or they don't have solution space to explore, really. Implementing a simple feature, or just making a simple code change. Those maybe not big enough for a design document. But there's not a lot of things that are too big for a design document, or some kind of design and planning. The size does impact what kind of information should be in the design docs, and for very large projects, you'll probably have multiple designs. The next question is how to write a design document. And for this video, we're going to take a close look at a blog post that was written about Google's design doc philosophy. We're going to go over the highlights and then add a couple of extra notes at the end of mine, and I'll also have that post linked down below. It's not an official Google blog post, but I don't know the source of how it's Google, but anyway. The first highlight is that design docs are informal, and they can therefore take any shape that they need to in order to convey the requisite information for the design. A very common starting point, however, that you will probably choose to use yourself because it's very convenient, and it's also proven to work. First, go over the context, then the scope. How much should this design document actually aim to accomplish? The goals and the non-goals. What does this document want to do or want to describe, and what does it not want to describe because it's better left for a different design document, or it's not relevant to this particular context, whatever. Then you also want to include the design itself, any alternatives considered, so that you have a good analysis of we chose this design because it was the best out of this this pool of options. And then also any cross-cutting concerns, so things like privacy, security, anything that's not related to the direct value proposition of this particular feature or project work. Another good question is how long should a design document be? And the sorry, been itching in my eye. The guideline in the blog post is that they should be sufficiently detailed, but short enough to actually be read by busy people. And this kind of translates into, for larger projects, 10 to 20-ish pages, but also says that smaller projects with 1 to 3 page documents are also totally fine. I write a lot of 1 to 3 page documents because I am designing a lot of these smaller features, but I've also written a couple of 5+ pages, and those are generally for things that are of larger consequence or of larger impact. It's a case-by-case kind of thing, but size them appropriately. Another key point made in the blog post is that writing design docs is overhead, and if you don't have to write a design document, you shouldn't. The overhead that they include is that you have to involve several people. You also have to get review and consensus, which takes often takes longer than writing the document itself. You have to do research for the design, and you have to after the design is accepted and reviewed and stuff, you also then have to actually implement it and execute on it and stuff. So there's a lot of stuff that goes into it. So if you don't need a design document, maybe the work in question is just too small, or it's very well defined and there's not a huge solution space to explore, has particular trade-offs that are not easily identifiable, probably just get to work. There's no real reason to write a design document in every case. One thing that the post points out is that prototypes are something that can be very valuable for for evidence of a particular method outlined in a design document, but they do also take some time, so it's important to consider that as well. A couple of other things to keep in mind: design documents may take multiple rounds of review to reach consensus. People have to first look at it. They have to identify what questions they have, and then present them in the document. Someone has to go and answer those questions. Maybe a comment spurs more comments from other people. The point being, it takes a while for everyone to kind of get their thoughts and get the important thoughts heard and addressed and directed in an appropriate way. Something else to keep in mind is that once your design is approved, you need to actually execute it. It feels really good to kind of get a design document approved and reviewed and answer all the questions and stuff. But that's only the first part of it, right? You also need to implement, you need to iterate, and there are probably phases and milestones that you also need to get started on. And you know, how you do that depends on the project, but there's always the doing part once you've done the decision part. A couple of things that I think some design documents would benefit from that are not mentioned in the blog post. Some kind of like timeline of phases of implementation or milestones can be helpful for kind of larger initiatives or larger projects. It helps you break the project into smaller chunks. I won't go too much into that. I think most of us know, why that's valuable, but something to consider for any of your larger projects that you're writing design docs for. Another thing that may be valuable is having an exit plan. So in the case that this design becomes unrelevant or unviable or anything that leads to the cancellation essentially of this design, what things need to be considered? Are there any repositories that will need to be kind of evaluated? Like, do we just abandon this repository? Do we have to morph it into something else? Stuff like that. I don't know what I don't have any good examples of that right now, but might be something that you need to think about, maybe ask for getting larger review or larger approval on the design. Lastly, I have a couple of just miscellaneous thoughts of my own. First, design docs are not easy. They're basically an exercise in communication, ideation, persuasion, and there's a lot of technical ability that's also required to write a good design document. You have to be able to write clearly and effectively. It's a lot of work, and a lot of times it also requires research and gathering information about the current state of things. It's a lot of work, even after you have written the first draft and gotten it approved and everything. The project work afterwards is also, it's not easy. If it feels like a lot of work, that's because it is, but it's manageable. For writing your first few design documents, I would urge you to find a mentor who will help you, who will give you feedback on your first drafts. I have one in my team. Who every time I write a design document or something like that, I always show it to him, and he'll give me some pretty good suggestions on how to, if it's a good idea. Sometimes it's just not a good idea or it doesn't make sense. That's fine. Other things like, is this really the question we need to be asking? Is this really have you considered this alternative? Things like that. And then another thing is get it in front of a wider audience sooner than later. Remember the 80-20 rule. 80% of the value is done in 20% of the time, and then the remaining 20% of the value is done in 80% of the time. You want to do the initial 80%, and then, with the help of everyone else, you want to get the additional 20% to make your design document from good to perfect. Present it to people when it's good. Don't wait until it's perfect, because that'll take too long. Always keep in mind the most effective uses of your time. This is kind of just a sort of related note about design documents in general. So in the book Staff Engineer, Leadership Beyond the Management Track by Will Larson, which I've referenced in a previous video, he says that one way to determine your team's engineering strategy is to write five design documents, pull out the common parts, synthesize them into one coherent kind of document, and that's the strategy. That's it. That's the only thing you have to do. It's kind of boring, as they say in the book, not very interesting, but he talks more about strategy and why a good one is typically a boring strategy as well. I highly recommend reading the page on that. That particular section also has an entry on the web version of the book, so I will link that down below. Highly recommend reading that. It has more on design documents as well. Very good further reading. There's also a fun little extension of that into engineering vision. You take five engineering strategies, do the same thing, and then that's your engineering vision. So I think that's pretty cool. Highly recommend reading that. One last thing I want to say. Examples are really, really good to learn from. The Bazel build system, which is developed by Google, their build system has a proposal repository that's freely available. It's open source. It's on GitHub. Highly recommend giving that a read for some examples. They're all fully fledged, very detailed design document kind of documents. They're not exactly with the same format, but they kind of give you an idea of what it's like to write a proposal. A proposal document, which is similar to a design document. So highly recommend taking a look at that on the link down below. And yeah, that's all I have for today. I hope this was a good video. I hope you learned a lot about design documents, why they're important, when to use them, and what it takes to write a good one, what goes into a good one. That's all I got. So thank you for watching, and remember, stick on your path to staff. Ba-da.